there are bacteria that live in our gut that not only produce vitamin K and the B vitamins, which is very important to us surviving. So in other words, they're not just camping out to hurt us. There are bacteria that are good for us. And a matter of fact, as our friend who is out with pneumonia, if his doctor gave him antibiotics, I immediately asked, is his mother still giving him probiotics as he's taking the antibiotics? Because if you take antibiotics and knock out all the good for you bacteria in your gut, you're going to not be well for long, because our body needs the good for you bacteria. So then if you take probiotics, and my parents asked me yesterday what kind of drug probiotics were. I want you to be very clear. A probiotic is a little capsule that has a whole bunch of bacteria in it. They're just good for you bacteria. So what you're doing is yeah, that's kind of freaky, isn't it? So what you're doing is, and that's why they keep them in the cold. You notice that if you buy probiotics, they're in the fridge. They shouldn't be on the shelf, because the idea is you want to keep them alive. That's what you're paying for. And you're adding back the good bugs, the good bacteria, to your system so that they help you. And they actually do help you. They help you fight against bad bugs, bad bacteria in your system. So that's why a lot of moms will make sure if their kids taking an antibiotic, they're also doing probiotics, or they're feeding them organic yogurt. The organic yogurts that have the live cultures in them, and you'll see on the organic yogurt, it'll say live cultures added back, and it'll list them, acidophilus and lactobacillus, and they're listing bacteria that they've put back in there because those are the good for you ones that you want in your system. Oh my gosh, we're eating bacteria. Oh. Anyway, but if you eat cheese, you're doing that anyway, so just let it go. There's a lot of stuff that there's good for us bacteria and there's bad for us bacteria. We just got to be aware of that. And then we talked about that there were other ways that our body fight, and we went through a bunch of them. I'm not going to review them all, but we went through that the white blood cells help us, right? That there were macrophages, that there were twing archers, right? That were the antibody-producing cells, that there were killer T cells, there were ninjas in the complement system, which are actually 20 different chemicals that come in, and they actually chop up the bad guys into little pieces. That's why the guys I studied with called them ninjas, because they acted like ninjas. Some of them even shaped like ninja stars. The different antibodies, some of them actually are shaped with 5 points. I know, I'm telling you, when we studied it, it's just, oh look, that's a ninja star. The immune system is what protects us. Now remember I told you last week that the antibodies were specific? That your body developed an antibody that was specific to a particular disease, a particular bad guy. And that after it made those antibodies to the particular bad guy, that it actually had a memory response, that it would go back and it would keep it in the arsenal so that the next time your body saw that bad guy, it could pull those out of the arsenal and take them out. I told you that last week, right? Okay, and I told you that was the premise of vaccinations. That the idea that why people started getting vaccinations was that if you could put a low strength, or dead even, version of a bug into your body, bug being a microbe of some sort, a bacteria or a virus or something like that, then your body would make antibodies to it and have a memory response to it so that the next time your body saw it, then your body would go, I got your number, bad guy, and it would pull out these antibodies, twang, and that'd be it, and they'd stick on the bad guy. And then the complement system would come in and cut them up, or the macrophage would come eat them or whatever. It would take them out. I said that the T cells, we talked about that ever so briefly, were actually cells in the immune system that they don't shoot the antibodies, they're attached to the cell, and that the cell itself connects to the bad guy. There's also memory T cells, just like with the B cells that make the antibodies, and that they would attach to the bad guy and then they would take the bad guy out. That was how they worked. And those were particularly pointed at cancerous cells and at virus infected cells. Now let me explain to you why. Remember I told you that the antigens, which are the part that the antibodies are made for, are kind of like flags on the outside of the cells. Technically it's a protein called the glycoprotein. It's this big funky protein, but we can think of them as flags. It works fine, okay? And our body knows our glycoproteins. It knows our flags. It says, oh, that's me, that's cool. And if it sees something else, and we talked about this last week when we did the blood typing, that if it sees a flag that doesn't belong there, then, the troops are called out and everything starts getting crazy, right? Okay, well, when a cell is infected with a virus, it actually puts up a little flag on the outside of the cell that says, I have a virus, I'm sick, something's wrong with me. And that's how the T cells are able to come along and say, ooh, look, there's a little flag. They're warning us that this cell, it has a virus in it, and that virus is in there doing bad things. So we're going to kill that cell. We're going to take that cell out. Because if we don't take that cell out, when the virus kills that cell, it's going to spread to all the other cells. So it takes out that cell before it can spread. I want you to understand cancer cells work that way also. That we are born with cancer cells in our body. From the time you're born, we have cells that have some kind of aberration, which means something's wrong with the DNA, whether it be a mutation or whatever. Now, there are things that we can do in our environment to make ourselves have more cancerous cells, but even just on a regular, natural, normal basis, we have aberrant cells, cells that have mutated that might be cancerous, okay, that grow incorrectly because of the DNA, which we talked about last week. The DNA could be messed up. The reason you and I or little babies don't have cancer is because the immune system is working correctly, because those cells have weird flags on the outside of them. One of the ways our body fights, I'm going to get off the immune system here in just a sec, but we got to do two more things because I forgot to tell you something last week. One of the things our body uses to fight, we did talk about, was a fever. Our body will give us a fever. And I want to make this point today because this is important to everything we're going to study from here on out. God designed our bodies perfectly. Yes, we're in a fallen world. Yes, things go wrong. But God designed the system perfectly. So our bodies will do whatever they have to keep us well. And that doesn't mean it'll be comfortable. And that doesn't mean you'll feel very good when it's doing it. But our body will do everything that it has to keep us well right now. Not later. It's not looking down the road. It's doing what it has to survive right now. Be clear on this. And because of that, if we put our body in a situation where it's stressed for long periods of time, eventually you're going to develop diseases because our body can't handle it, and it will continue to try to keep us well for right now, even at the expense of later. Okay? Now, a fever is a response to a bad guy, because I told you last week that a fever heats the body up so that our immune system can run harder and faster because it's got more heat to it, so it's got more energy to make the chemical reactions and stuff. And the idea is to take the bad guy and cook him so that you've melted the bad guy. That's the idea. You don't want your fever to go up so high that it melts you. And that's important. So if you're about 104, you're supposed to start really paying attention. But up until 101, 102, if you feel lousy with the fever, that's the idea. Because let's be honest, when you have a fever and you feel lousy, what do you want to do? Thank you. You want to sleep. Guess what you should be doing if you're sick? Sleep. So what do? We take some kind of drug, aspirin, Tylenol, whatever, so that we don't feel badly anymore. It drops our fever, so our body can't respond to the bad guy anymore. We now feel good, so we get up and run around, and then we get even sicker. Because what we did was we just undermined what our body was trying to do to fight. Does that make sense to everybody? Now I want to go a step further. I have heard for years that colds, colds are detoxing. And I said to my mom just recently, because we all seem to get colds, they're going around right now. I said, well, if it's just detoxing, why do we see them happen at the same time? That didn't make sense. Well, then in my reading, I actually got a better explanation. There is a virus or a bug that we're passing to one another, but if your body is really strong enough, you won't get it. And you've probably noticed that before, that everybody in your family got something and you were the only one that didn't. That's because your immune system was able to fight it off. But let's say you got a cold, and the reason they say that colds are detoxing is you don't see people in the last stages of cancer ever get a cold. Okay? They don't. Because colds are actually like a fever. Get this. If your body isn't cooking the bad guy out, it's diluting it out. Now, do you guys know what diluting means? Like if you take something like lemonade in the can and you put it in the pitcher and then you dilute it by putting water in it to make it taste right? You ever done that with the orange juice or lemonade or something? That's diluting it. Our body dilutes the bad guy. What it does is it starts to water everything down, so we go, and all that stuff comes up, and it comes out of our nose. Your body is trying to wash the bad guy out by diluting it. That made sense. And see, we are getting that. It is a bug related, but it's like a fever where your body, the cold, is actually your response to try to dilute the bad guy and get it out of your body. So what does that mean? If your body, or is trying to get it out. That's not a good time to take decongestants, because a decongestant makes you reabsorb all that stuff so you're no longer congested, and then it goes back into your body and it makes you sicker. Does everybody see the problem? So really what it gets down to, and I want to make this one of the principles that we're going to apply in the next several weeks, is that being uncomfortable and pain is not necessarily a bad thing. Why do I say that? How else is our body going to get our attention? If you don't feel some kind of pain or discomfort, are you really going to stop and try to look at what's wrong? I was talking to one of the moms this morning, and she says she can see it on her son's skin. And I said, thank God. If you get a skin rash or something from something, you know that thing is affecting your body. Thank God. Because then you can identify what it is and try to do something about it. The problem is when you're sick and you don't know what it is. That's a problem. So guys, you need to thank God when you can identify what the stuff is and then do something about it. Don't take a drug to get rid of the symptoms. That is God's early warning system. Hello, something's wrong. I feel like my body's got to go slap, slap, slap. Pay attention, you know, and I'm like, what? Because I'm so busy trying to do that I'm not paying attention. The idea is to pay attention. When your body gives you these clues, don't just go take an aspirin or something. Think about, did I not drink enough water today? Do I have a dehydration headache? Did I not eat anything for the last 8 hours? And am I having a low blood sugar headache? Do you see what I'm saying? Try to identify what's going on and give your body what it needs. Don't just take a drug to say, shut up. Figure out what it needs. Just because something was organic doesn't mean your body likes it. I used to buy organic wheat, grind the wheat, make the bread, totally natural. I have a wheat sensitivity. I found out the hard way, and it was my skin that was screaming. And I couldn't figure out what was going on, went to doctors, da-da-da-da-da. Finally, it was prayer. And I'm like, Lord, I hear you. What is it? I'll give it up. And finally, he showed me it was wheat. And when I gave up the wheat, the skin cleared up. When I ate wheat, 2 days later, the skin flared up again. I'm like, okay, I got it, Lord. I hear you. I got it. All right, so I stay away from wheat now. I'm not saying it's bad for you. We're going to talk about it next week. But it's bad for me. So just because something is good doesn't mean it's good for you. And I want you to understand, if you have food sensitivities, it doesn't mean they'll last forever. Frequently, it's an imbalance in our body. And if we can get our body well, eventually you'll be able to go back to whatever you're having the sensitivity to. And please be aware that any pharmaceutical you take, any prescription drug that you take, there are going to be other consequences to whatever you're doing. So you always want to take them carefully. I'm not saying never take them. And I want to be very clear. Somebody asked last week about antibiotics. Antibiotics specifically kill bacteria, and they only kill certain bacteria. So you have to have the right antibiotic or, bactericidal drug to make sure you're killing the bacteria you want to kill. That's important, okay? Does not kill viruses at all. All right. So are antibiotics bad? No. Remember, the Bible tells us that we're to take dominion over creation. And I think the medical field is trying to take dominion over creation. We're trying to help people, right? So it's not a bad thing. What's bad about our culture is that we tend to just run for drugs. We don't stop and go, what did I do wrong? What could I change? What do I need to do to make my body well? Am I eating something that I shouldn't? Am I using a soap that I shouldn't be using? What am I doing? Am I drinking enough water? Blah, 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 blah. Figure out what it is before you go running for the medicine cabinet and find a drug. That's the idea. And the problem is that our doctors have been trained to think that that's what people want. I've taken my husband to the doctor when he had a problem, and when the doctor went through what it was and said what pharmaceuticals he could give him, and then I said to the doctor, we don't want drugs. We want to know how my husband can change his lifestyle so that he won't have this problem again. The doctor literally came out of his chair and goes, really? And I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, well, he can do, and the guy starts listing off the things. And I looked at the guy, and I was older than he was by the time I was sitting there. That's the hard part. When all the policemen and the doctors start looking young, you're getting old. But I remember looking at him, and I said, why didn't you just start with that and tell us what he could do instead of telling us what drugs to take? He goes, most people just want me to give them a prescription and leave. They don't want to hear what they have to change. People don't want to change anything. They just want me to write them a drug. And I go, well, we don't. He goes, that's great. And so he didn't write us a prescription. He told us what my husband needed to change. And we changed it. And the problem went away. So I don't want you to think this is the doctor's fault. It's not. It's our culture. It's what we've told the doctors we want. You tell the doctor, look, I don't want a drug. I want to know how to fix this. You'll be surprised how happy a lot of these doctors will be. They'll be like, oh, really? And they'll be like, wow. you know, because they're just not used to hearing it anymore. Our immune system, very important. It's very important that we feed our immune system properly, that we keep it healthy.